Hilchos, Maachalos, Asuros, Perek Arba Asar. The laws of forbidden foods, chapter 14. It's a Sunday morning at Chabad. The noise is always a little bit louder in the background, so forgive me for that. But we are learning this Perek of Rambam. Now, unlike for the last 2 weeks, where every day we discussed a specific forbidden food, now we're moving on to general rules about forbidden food. Today, we're going to be focused on what's called shi'ur, the requisite amount, the kamut, the quantity that you have to eat in order to become liable for any prohibition, and not just the quantity, but also the time frame. There's a time frame that you have to eat the amount in order to become liable. That's the main topic for today. And it's going to conclude with a very interesting case where you can eat 1 olive size of meat and get 5 punishments for it. So we're going to see about that in the end. It says the Rambam halacha aleph, Kol isurei Maachalos shebaTorah. All forbidden foods in the Torah, shi'uran b'kezayis beinani. The requisite amount that you become liable is if you eat an average size olive. Now, this is not talking about today, you go into the store and get an olive, that's how much you have to eat. It's a very specific Torah measurement that became a great debate over generations, how much it is. The 2 primary authorities on shi'urei Torah, which is like amounts of eating in the Torah, are Rabbi Avraham Chaim Noah. He wrote a book actually called Shi'urei Torah. Rabbi Avraham Chaim Noah, he was a Chabad Chassid. Avraham Chaim Noah, that was his last name. Noah. Noah. Like nice, beautiful. Noah. So he was the one main authority, and the Chazon Ish, who was the head of the Litvish community in Israel. So the way the Rambam describes it in a different book is a third of an egg. A third of an egg. Other places describe it as a half of an egg. But we don't really use eggs to determine it. We have to use the way these authorities converted it into grams or cubic centimeters. So it's anywhere between, they write in the notes over here, anywhere between about 28 to 36 grams qualifies as a kazayas. So that's the amount that you have to eat in any case to become liable. Bein lemalkos, bein lekares, bein lemisa b'dei shamayim. Whether we're talking about a punishment of lashes, or excision, or death at the hands of heaven, it's always a kazayat. Ukvar beyarnu, we already explained, shekala mechuyev kares. Oy misa b'dei shamayim. Al maichol, any case where for eating, you're going to be liable to excision, or death by the hands of heaven, even though technically Hashem is supposed to take care of you, loike, the court will also give you lashes. Because that's our way of taking care of you. Hashem's going to do whatever he needs to do to cut the neshama off. But for us in the court, we have to give you lashes. Halacha beis, v'shir zeh im kol hashiurim, this requisite amount of kazayit, along with any other amounts that we find in the entire Torah, for ritual impurity or for eating, halacha l'Moshe misinai heim. They're all a direct transmission of Allah from Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. The asr min ha-Torah lechol kol shu midavar asr. Understand that it's biblically forbidden to eat even the smallest amount. Let's say pork. You're only going to get lashes if you eat an olive size of pork. But does that mean you can eat less than that? Just because there's no punishment? No, it's forbidden. Aval eine loikel al kazayis. You only get lashes for an olive size. V'im achal kol shu pachas mikashir. If you ate the smallest amount, less than the proper biblical amount, makinaise makas mardos. We're not going to give you biblical lashes, we'll give you rabbinic lashes. Here's a very interesting thing. Kazayis she'amarnu, when we say you have to eat an olive size, chutz mishel bein hashinayim. It's besides for the food that gets stuck between your teeth. When you bite into a piece of meat or into a piece of bread, right away a little bit of the pieces get stuck into your teeth. Those, according to the Talmud and according to halacha, it's not considered that you had benefit from it, because it stays in your teeth. So therefore, you have to factor in an olive size besides for that amount. Aval masha bein hachanichayim, but any food which gets stuck between your gums, doesn't really happen often, but sometimes you get like food inside the palate by the gums. It doesn't stay in the teeth, it's in the gums. That, says the Rambam, mitztaref l'masha bala. That counts, that combines to the food that you swallowed. Because in the end of the day, your palate, your throat, benefited from an olive-sized portion of food. Afilu achal kechatzi zayis vehekiyeh. Watch this. Even if you ate a half an olive size, swallowed it, then you vomited it, v'chazar v'achal oisei chatzi zayis atzmei sheheki, and then you re-ate that same half an olive size which you vomited, you ate it. So in total, your throat has consumed an olive size. Chayev, you're now liable. Even though in quantity you only consumed, in the end of the day, and half an olive. But since she'ein hachiyuv elal hanaz hagarain, the whole obligation comes because of your throat or your palate having pleasure, and in this case it had pleasure because ayis midavar asur. an olive size of forbidden food. Therefore, you're liable. Okay, now we have the picture on the screen. Kezayis chelev, ay nevela, ay pigul, ay neisar, v'chayetze b'hen. You have a piece of meat that's forbidden. It's an olive-sized portion. Either it's fat, forbidden fat, or it's dead kosher meat that wasn't slaughtered properly, or it's pigul. Pigul means it was a sacrifice meat that was offered with the wrong intentions. Nosar, leftover, means it was left past the proper time. Every sacrifice is a specific time. You can eat it 1 day, 2 days. You left it past that time, it becomes notar, leftover. So you have an olive size. That means if you would eat it as is, you'd be liable. Then, shehinichai b'chama v'nismait. You left it in the sun. What happens in the sun? The heat, it shrinks it. So now it's less than an olive size. Ha'oichlei potter. If you eat it, you're exempt, because you didn't eat an olive size. Again, exempt means from punishment. You're still liable to Hashem, but you're exempt from punishment. Chazar v'hinichai b'gshamim v'nispach. You took this piece of meat that shrank, and now you moved it to a rainy place. What happens when rain comes down? It expands. Chayavin alav karei malchus. Now you're liable to the punishment, excision or lashes, because originally it was an olive size, and now it came back to being an olive size. But what if it started off as less than an olive size? Then you put it in the rain and it expanded to more than an olive size. While it's forbidden, you're not going to get lashes for it, because the natural size wasn't an olive size. In the first case, it began as an olive, shrunk in the sun, re-expanded in the rain. That's a problem. Starts off smaller and only expands in the rain. We can't hold you accountable physically for that. Halacha hey kvar b'yarnu, we already explained. Shekol isurin shebatayra ein mitzdarfin zeim zel lekazayis. Different types of prohibitions don't combine to an olive size. Even though if both prohibitions are governed by an olive size, but they don't combine. So let's say you have a piece of non-kosher meat, and a piece of non-kosher fish, and a piece of dead kosher animal, and together it creates an olive size, you're not liable, because they're all different types of prohibitions. Chutz mi besar nevela in besar treifa, except for a couple of things. Dead meat and mortally wounded meat, those two come together, even though they're two different types of prohibitions. You have a half an olive size of dead kosher meat, half an olive size of mortally wounded treif meat, that becomes one olive size, you're liable. The isurei nazir sheyizbardu b'mekayman. Also, the prohibitions of a Nazirite that are going to be explained in their place in the next book, in the 6th book. We have a whole section on the Nazir. He cannot eat grapes, he cannot eat wine, he cannot eat grape seeds or grape peels. Let's say he makes a concoction of all four, and together it's a kazayas. Even though it's different types of prohibitions, it all combines. Also, v'chameshes mine tvua, the 5 types of grain: wheat, barley, oats, spelt, rye, ukmachin shalahen, v'habitzekas shalahen, and their flours and their doughs, hakol mitzdarfin lekazayis, all combines to one olive size. Bein leisur chametz bepesach, whether it's with regards to Pesach, chametz, right? Let's say you have a little wheat flour with water and wheat dough and spelt dough, and all together it becomes an olive size. Prohibited. You get lashes. You get the punishment. Bein leisur chadash milifnei ha'emer, or with regards to the prohibition of new grain. In chapter 10, we talked about this. Before the Omer offering is brought, you cannot eat from any of the new harvest. What if you eat a little bit from this, a little bit from that, and together there's an olive size? It's prohibited. Bein li'isurei ma'aser sheni utrumais, or with regards to the prohibitions of the second tithe and the truma. Where's my picture for this? I always bring this up when we have the picture of the truma and ma'aser, but you know what I'm talking about. It's the gifts to the Kohen. Whenever a person harvests his crop, here it is. He has to give 2% to the Kohen, 10% to the Levi, and 10% bring to Jerusalem. So, let's say Meiser Sheni, you cannot eat outside of Jerusalem. And Truma, a regular Jew cannot eat. Let's say you took a bunch of these things together, and you made it one olive size. Forbidden. We're going to hold you accountable. Yeira Ali, the Rambam says even further. It seems to me, Shekol HaChayav B'Truma O Maisres, any grain or any produce which was obligated to be taken tithes from, Mitzdaref Lekazayas B'Tevel. While it's in its untithed state, it can combine to an olive size. Let's say you have a pile of apples, a pile of oranges, a pile of barley. Okay, they all have to be taken truma and maestros from. Before you took it, they're all tevel, they're all untithed and forbidden. You take a half an olive of the apple, half an olive of the orange, half an olive of the barley, you eat it all together, you're going to be held liable. Because while they're in the tevel state, they're all the same prohibition. What What would that be similar to? L'nivlas hashor, v'nivlas haseh, v'nivlas hatzvi. If you had a cow drop dead, a sheep drop dead, and a deer drop dead, and you combined from their meat one kazayis, shein mitzdarfin lekazayis, kameshem yarnu. They combine to an olive size. It's all one type of prohibition. Different animals, but one umbrella in the Torah that says you cannot eat non-kosher meat, dead meat. Same thing here. You cannot eat untithed produce. Who cares? There's different types of produce, apples and oranges. Doesn't matter. Halacha zayin ha'oichel achila gedoyla midavar asur. What if somebody eats a big portion of something forbidden? You got a Subway sandwich, foot-long pork sandwich, with cheese. So you got a whole bunch of things there, a whole bunch of problems. And you ate the whole thing. So already on the olive size, you become liable. But now you ate a foot long, now you have, 15, 20 kazayases. So what happens now? Says the Rambam, Ein mechayvin oisei malkus oikares al kol kazayas u kazayas. You're not going to get separate lashes or separate punishment for each individual olive size. It's one obligation for the whole eating. Except, if the witnesses who were watching you eat the footlong, if they're warning you during the sandwich, I'll call kazayas or kazayas. They go, bro, you just ate an olive size, don't eat more. And he eats another one. Hey, don't eat another olive size. And he eats another one. Now chayav al kol asra v'asra. Now he's going to be liable for every warning, separate punishment. Afal pishi yachila achas v'lo hifsik. Even though it was one long eating, you sat down at the table, you ate the whole meal at once. Doesn't matter. Their warnings interrupted the eating. In that way, you get separate punishments. Let's talk now about time frames. Halacha ches. Ha'oichel kisa'ira ekechardo. Me'echad mikol ma'achalos ha'asurim. You eat a tiny portion, a barley corn or a mustard seed size of any forbidden food. V'shaha ma'at. Then you take a little break. V'chazar v'achal kechardo. And you eat another mustard seed size, tiny crumb. V'chein ad shehishlim kazayas. And you kept on going till you finished an olive size. So with breaks, you in total, you ate a kazayas. Bein b'shoigeg, bein b'mezid, whether you did it inadvertently or purposely. Says the Rambam, it goes like this. Im shaha mitchila v'ad soif, kedei achilas shalish beitzim. If from the first barley corn that entered your mouth till the last one, there's the time it takes to consume a piece of bread that's the size of 3 eggs. This is called achilat pras. Yitztaref hakoil. Then everything combines because you ate it in the space that's usually what's called an eating is done. A session of eating takes this long. Therefore, it all combines. You'd be liable to excision or lashes or a sacrifice, whatever the case may be, as though you consumed the whole olive at once. But if from the beginning to the end, there's more than this time elapses, even though you didn't take a break in between the pieces. You ate one mustard seed, second mustard seed, third mustard seed, all in a row. Since you only concluded the whole olive size in more than the time it takes to eat this pras, which is called a piece of bread the size of 3 eggs, they don't combine and you're exempt from punishment. What is the time frame? Massive argument among the authorities, anywhere between 2 to 9 minutes. So it's a very big chasm. So we always say for different mitzvot, you kind of adopt this more stringent, more lenient.
Why should it be
so big of a gap?
No, it's 2 minutes or 10 minutes. It's not a long time anyway.
Well, but it makes a difference. The point is, if you ate, do you have to eat the whole olive in 2 minutes or in 10 or 9 minutes? It's there's different authorities here, but the point is that there's a time frame that you have to consume it in. That's for food. For drinking, it works a little differently. Let's say you consume a revi'it, which is about 3 to 4 ounces of Gentile wine, little by little, or you melted, kind of crushed into a more drinky substance, a bunch of chametz on Pesach, or forbidden fats, the gmoi ma'at ma'at, and you swallowed it little by little, or you consumed some blood little by little. The point is, it was a liquid that you're bringing into your mouth piece by piece. So now the time frame is not the time it takes to eat 3 eggs. It's the time it takes to drink a revi'is. If you, from the beginning to the end, you spent the time it takes to drink a revius, a quarter of a log of liquid, mitzdarfin, they combine. V'im lav ein mitzdarfin, if not, then it does not combine. And you would be exempt from punishment, even though it's forbidden to do so. Halacha yud. Kol ha'oichlim ha'asurim ein chayav aleim ad sheyochal osan derech hana. General rule. All forbidden foods, you're only liable if you ate them in the way of having pleasure. Let's say, for example, you did an intravenous shot, and you stuck into your system some forbidden stuff. That's not derech hana'ah. It's not the way to enjoy it. Chutz mi basar b'chalav v'kilaya kerem, except for meat and milk, and the mixtures in the vineyard. L'fishalei nemar b'hen achila. In the Torah, it doesn't say the word eating about them. Elohoitzi isur achilasan b'lashon acheras. It expressed the prohibition of eating in a different language. B'lashon bishol, b'lashon hektish. In meat and milk, it says you cannot cook meat and milk. Even though it means eating, the word used is cook. And when it comes to the vineyard mixtures, it says it's going to become forbidden. It doesn't say eating. So that is lesser oisan ba'afilo shaloi kedarech hana. That forbids them, even if you don't consume them the normal way of having pleasure. Ketzad, what would that look like? Kegayin harishahimcha es hachelev ugemoi kishehu cham. Let's say you liquefied fat and you poured it down your throat, boiling. Ad shenichve greine mimenu. Until your throat burns. Okay, you can see the guy's pained expression on his face. He's eating hot fat, and it's burning his throat. Or you ate raw fat. Nobody consumes raw fat. Or you put bitter stuff like wormwood or gal, very bitter stuff, into non-kosher wine. Or a pot of non-kosher meat, and you ate them as they are bitter. It's not a pleasurable way. You ate a forbidden food after it's spoiled, and it's cancelled from human consumption. You're exempt from punishment. But if you were to put the bitter food into a pot of meat and milk, or into wine made from a forbidden vineyard mixture, and you ate it, even though it's bitter, even though it's not the natural, pleasurable way to enjoy it, chayav, you're liable. Because in these two cases, we don't look at the hana'ah, we don't look at the pleasure. Yud beis. A person consumes something forbidden in a joking way, or just as if like you didn't even mean to. You were like just doing it casually. Even though you never had in mind to actually eat. Since your throat had pleasure, chayav, you're liable, as if you had actually had intention to eat it. But if it's a pleasure which comes against somebody's will, someone forces it down your throat, in any forbidden prohibition, in any forbidden food, if you focus your mind on having pleasure, that's forbidden. If not, then it's permitted. Someone forces non-kosher meat down your throat. If while it's going down you have in mind to enjoy the taste, then you get a punishment. If not, it's permitted. Yud Gimel. A person eats something forbidden because of an appetite. Doesn't mean to spite Hashem, just wants to enjoy it. He heard lobster is really good, he wants to taste it. Or he's just hungry. Chayav, then of course you're liable. But if you're wandering in a desert, you're so hungry, you have nothing to eat except for something forbidden, of course, it's permitted because of danger to your life. Life precedes everything. But if you're just hungry on a regular day and you walk into McDonald's, that's a problem. Yudalid, ubra shehiricha maichal aser. A pregnant woman who smells something forbidden, and they can have cravings, and it can get really dangerous if you don't fulfill them. So she's smelling a forbidden food. Sacrificed meat, it's consecrated to the temple. Pork meat. What do? You first give her from the gravy of the meat. Don't give her the meat itself. If she calms down, good. If not, give her the actual meat, smaller than the regular size, less than an olive size. If she still doesn't calm down, she wants more, we're allowed to give her, it's life and death situation. So we can give her the meat until she calms down.
What do you mean, how does it come to life and death? she just ever
Apparently, if she has this massive craving, it could lead to her becoming really, really sick and endanger the baby. Tesvav. V'chein ha'chayla shehiriach davar sheyesh by chaymetz v'chayetzi by. A sick person smells food that contains vinegar or something like it, midvarim shema'arerin es hanefesh, things that can arouse a soul's desire, and he's very sick, and if he doesn't have it, he's going to die. Dinay ke'ubara, he's treated like a pregnant woman, and we give him whatever he needs. Tezayin misha achzei bulmus. Somebody who was caught by bulmus. Bulmus means severe hunger. He becomes faint, he becomes dizzy, his eyes can't see straight, he's super, super starving. We don't follow any systems or steps. You give him forbidden foods right away if that's what he needs, till his eyes come back into focus. We don't try to find something first permitted. We go quickly to whatever is accessible. However, within forbidden foods, you have to be a little bit of a rabbi or a knowledgeable Jew. You give him the lighter prohibitions first. You have to know in the Torah what's considered more severe, more light. If his eyes come into focus with the lighter prohibition, that's enough. If not, then you go to the strict one. So here you have a couple of cases that Rambam's going to give us. Ketzad, what does it mean to know what's lighter and what's more strict? We have tevel, untithed produce, and a dead animal, dead kosher meat. Fascinating, you would think it's the opposite. You give him the meat first, because the meat only carries a prohibition of lashes. Shahatevel b'misa, untithed produce comes with death at the hands of heaven. Nevelo sfichei shvi'is, if you have dead animal, and shmita, produce that grew wild in the 7th year. Here you give him first the shmita produce. That's much less of a prohibition than the dead kosher meat. They're only forbidden rabbinically. Things that grow wild in the sabbatical year, if you didn't plant them, they're only forbidden rabbinically. Tevelu shvi'is, what if you have untithed produce and actual shmita fruit? You go with the shmita fruit first. Tevelu truma, if you have untithed produce and truma, which is reserved only for a kohen, if you don't have enough time to actually tithe the produce and make it permitted, give him the untithed produce, even though it carries the heavenly death penalty, it's still not as holy as truma is. Anything in similar situations is the same thing. And now we come to the case I mentioned before, where you eat one piece of meat and you get 5 sets of punishments. We already explained that one prohibition cannot take effect if a previous prohibition is already in effect, unless both prohibitions came at once, or the new prohibition included more objects in the prohibition. Isur Maisif means it included more more people that cannot eat it, or Isur Kailal, it encompasses more objects. The scope of the prohibition expands. Lefichach, because of this principle, we can now appreciate what the Talmud says. Yesh eichel kazayis echad. You have a guy who eats one olive-sized piece of meat, the loike aleha chamish malkias, and he gets 5 sets of lashes. Of course, provided he has to be warned against all 5 prohibitions that are in it. Ketzad, what does this look like? What's the actual case? And then I'll explain it in a second. Kegoin tameh, a person who's ritually impure, she'achal kazayis chelev, that ate a olive size of forbidden fat, shenoisar, that was left past the proper time, min hamukdashim, from a sacrifice, b'yom kippurim, and he eats it on Yom Kippur. Impure guy eating forbidden fats on Yom Kippur from a sacrifice that was left over time. All 5. Loika, you get lashes mishum eichel chelev, for eating forbidden fats. Or mishum eichel noisar, for eating leftover sacrificial meat. Or mishum eichel b'yom kippurim, and for eating on Yom Kippur. Or mishum tameh she'achal kodesh, and for a ritually impure person eating a sacrifice. Or mishum shenena min hakodesh umal, and from abusing sacrificial foods. It's called sacrilege. Now, why does the new prohibitions take effect over the old ones? Because they all come in successive stages. Watch what happens. The animal itself, while the cow was alive, before any new prohibitions came onto it, the fat was certainly forbidden. Like any animal. The chelev is forbidden. But you were allowed to have benefit from it. Hikdisha, here's step 1. the moment you consecrated it as a sacrifice, nesar chelba bahana, the fats became forbidden to have pleasure from. Since there's now a new element of the prohibition included, it falls back, because the prohibition of pleasure was added, noisaf alav isur kadashim. So this prohibition of consecrated meat can fall onto the fats as well. So now there's two, forbidden fats and sacrificial meat. However, this forbidden fat was allowed to be consumed by Hashem. In other words, it could be served on the Mizbeach, but not by a regular person. Nasa noisar, the moment it becomes left over past the proper time, because a new prohibition was added. To Hashem, so to speak, you wouldn't offer leftover sacrificial meat, so now it also becomes additionally forbidden to the regular person. Now there's three. However, the person who ate the food, he only couldn't eat the fats, but he could eat the rest of the meat. Nitma, once he becomes impure, an impure person cannot eat sacrificial meat. Nesar af bivsara, because he becomes forbidden to eat the meat, so a new prohibition extends onto the fats as well, because of the meat prohibition expands to the fat. The moment Yom Kippur comes, you're going in order. Consecrated, leftover, impure, and now it's Yom Kippur. Now it's Yom Kippur, kol al kol ha'ichlin. Yom Kippur forbids all foods, including this one. Because he becomes forbidden to eat regular food, he also becomes a new prohibition to eat this forbidden fat. And therefore you have now 5 prohibitions gathering as one. Anything similar in any similar cases, the same thing. As long as the prohibitions come in successive order, one adding more over the other, the new prohibition takes effect, and you'll be liable to more and more sets of lashes for one olive-sized piece of meat.